What if first contact with alien intelligence already happened, and we just call it Earth? Tonight I want you to try something simple, but strange. The next time you see a crow on a power line, or a dog watching you from a window, or a spider frozen on its web, I want you to think, this is not just an animal. This is an alien mind, evolved on the same planet, but for a different world. This is a brain that slices reality into a different set of pieces than mine. And the real question is not, is it smart? The real question is, could we ever genuinely talk to each other? Not just get it to press a button for food. Not just train a trick. But have something like a conversation. A two-way exchange where both sides revise their picture of the world because of what the other one said. So here's our fundamental human-scale question for this journey. When I look into the eyes of a crow, or an octopus, or a whale, and I feel that flicker of connection, am I really meeting another mind? Or am I just projecting myself onto an inscrutable, beautiful machine? Can we truly talk to other minds on Earth, or are we mostly talking to ourselves? Beneath that is a deeper audit. Because if we can define, rigorously, what it means to have a two-way conversation with a bat, or an octopus, or a crow, if we can say exactly what counts as understanding between two very different nervous systems, then we are suddenly much closer to defining what understanding is in physical terms. And that doesn't just change how we see animals. It changes how we think about AI, about possible extraterrestrials, and even about each other. I'm Rowan Mercer, and this is the Science Audit. This is not going to be a montage of cute pets and feel-good stories. This is going to be an audit. We're going to stress test our assumptions about language, about meaning, and about minds. What actually counts as a conversation when the other brain evolved for a completely different world? Is meaning something we humans impose, or something that can exist between any two physical systems that exchange information? And if an alien spacecraft parked in orbit and pointed its instruments at Earth, how would it audit whether humans and animals are already talking? To answer any of that, we have to start with something deceptively simple. What is communication? In everyday language, communication is about sharing ideas, or expressing feelings. That's very human, very rich, and also very vague. In information theory, we strip it down to the skeleton. At its barest, communication is when a signal from a sender reduces uncertainty in a receiver. That phrase, reduces uncertainty, is the key. Imagine I have a deck of cards, and you're trying to guess the card I'm holding. At the start, you're completely in the dark, could be any one of 52. Your uncertainty is high. Then I send you a signal, maybe I say, it's red. Instantly, half the options vanish, now it's one of 26. I've reduced your uncertainty. If I say, it's a heart, now it's one of 13. Bit by bit, I'm shaving down your uncertainty using structured clues. That shaving down, that reduction of possibilities, is what Claude Shannon, the father of information theory, called information. Not meaning, in the sense of poetry or philosophy. Just structure that lets you rule out options. The more possibilities a signal can distinguish between, the more information it carries. Shannon information is like the shape of the message, not its soul. It tells you how many yes or no questions a signal can answer, but not what the answers are about. To talk about communication, we also need 3 more ideas, and I'll keep them intuitive. A signal is anything that varies in a way that can be noticed, a sound, a gesture, a color pattern. Noise is everything that scrambles that signal, wind, static, overlapping calls, or even a distracted brain. And channel capacity is how much information you can reliably push through the connection per unit time before it breaks down, like how a narrow pipe limits the amount of water that can flow. So, when a bird sings, or a dolphin clicks, or a cuttlefish flashes stripes, information theory asks, does this pattern actually reduce uncertainty in another animal? Does it help that receiver predict what will happen next, where food is, whether danger is coming, whether a mating opportunity is available? If yes, that's communication in the Shannon sense. But of course, we want more. We want semantic meaning, meaning as in, aboutness. We want to know not just that something is being signaled, but what. We want to know if there are words, if there is grammar, if any of this is perhaps close to language. So let's turn some of the clearest, most astonishing animal communication systems we know, and see what they tell us about other minds. Picture a summer field. A honeybee discovers a patch of flowers brimming with nectar, hundreds of meters from the hive. It drinks, loads up its pollen baskets, and then rockets home into the darkness of the hive interior. And then it begins to dance. On the vertical surface of the comb, it runs in a figure-8 pattern, a straight run, then a loop back, then another straight run. During the straight run, it waggles its abdomen rapidly. To us, it looks like frantic scribbling. But to the other bees, it's a map. The angle of the waggle run relative to gravity encodes the direction of the food source relative to the sun. Turn 30 degrees to the left of vertical. Fly 30 degrees left of the sun. The duration of the waggle phase, and the intensity, encode the distance. This is literally a vector, a direction and a magnitude, encoded in movement. Bees are doing something like vector calculus with their bodies. They convert a 3D, sun-centered navigation problem into a 2D dance inside a dark hive, and other bees read those signals, translate them back into flight instructions, and arrive, sometimes within meters, at the same patch of flowers. That is not random noise. That is spatial information, compressed and transmitted through a narrow noisy channel. One little dancing body in a crowded hive. Move from the field to the open ocean. Humpback whales produce songs that can last for hours, with repeated themes, phrases, and motifs. If you look at the structure of these songs over years, they evolve. A motif will appear, spread across a population, then be modified, sometimes completely replaced, like a new chorus taking over the old. These are dialects and cultural traditions, transmitted across thousands of kilometers of ocean. Birds do it too. Songbirds don't just sing generic birdsong. They have regional accents, local versions of a song that are learned socially. A sparrow raised with a different dialect will sing differently. Over time, these songs drift and split like languages. In the forests of Africa, vervet monkeys have distinct alarm calls for different predators, one for eagles, one for snakes, one for leopards. Play back the eagle call, and the group looks up and runs into cover. Play back the snake call, and they peer down and stand upright. It's not just danger. It's danger of a particular kind, with different appropriate responses. The call shapes behavior in a specific way. And under the waves, cephalopods, octopuses, cuttlefish, squid, flash and ripple with color patterns that coordinate hunting, signal aggression, or express what looks, disturbingly, like mood. A cuttlefish can send one pattern on one side of its body to intimidate a rival and another on the other side to court a mate, simultaneously. Its skin is a high-bandwidth display directly wired to its nervous system. All of this is communication. These are structured, repeatable signals that reduce uncertainty for receivers. Food is there. Predator above. I am ready to mate. I am dominant, back off. But what about the minds behind the signals? To answer that, we leave information theory for a moment and look at comparative cognition, the science of how different animals think, remember, and model the world. Some corvids, crows, ravens, jays hide food and come back for it later. That alone is not surprising. But when a scrubbed jay caches food while being watched by another jay, it often returns later, when unobserved, and moves the food to a new hiding place. It seems to behave differently when it knows it was seen. It acts as if it's asking, "What does that other bird know about where my food is?" This is what psychologists call theory of mind, the ability to represent what another individual knows or believes. It's a kind of mental mirror. I can simulate your perspective inside my own skull. Great apes show similar abilities. Some experiments suggest that chimpanzees can distinguish between a human who can see them and one who cannot, and adjust their behavior to hide or reveal information. It's messy, the data are debated. But together, they suggest that some animals have at least a rudimentary sense that other minds exist and have their own limited viewpoints. Self-recognition adds another layer. Take the classic mirror test. You put a mark of paint on an animal's forehead in a place it can't see without a mirror. Then you give it a mirror. If it touches its own forehead rather than the mirror, we interpret that as recognition. That's me. Great apes, dolphins, some whales, elephants, and at least one bird species, the Eurasian magpie, have past versions of this test. That doesn't mean other animals lack selves. It just means they don't express self-awareness in a way this particular human-designed test can detect. But it's a crack in the door. Then there are the navigators and memory artists. Clark's nutcracker, a small mountain bird, caches tens of thousands of seeds across hundreds of locations before winter, and recovers a significant fraction months later, often under snow. Migratory birds travel thousands of kilometers guided by the stars, the sun, Earth's magnetic field, even odors carried on the wind. Their internal models of space and time are different from ours, but they are precise, robust, and astonishing. So we have signals, we have minds that remember and infer, and we have social structures where information matters. How do we actually decode these alien signals at scale, without just seeing what we want to see? Here is where modern tools come in. Instead of a human researcher listening to whale song and hand-labeling patterns, we can dump massive recordings into machine learning systems. These algorithms don't know what a whale is, or what the ocean is. They just know that some sound features tend to appear together. Think of it like this. Imagine taking every syllable of every human language and plotting them in a high-dimensional space, where sounds that appear in similar contexts cluster together. Dog and puppy and hound might end up near each other because they show up with similar verbs. Pet, feed, walk, bark. That map doesn't tell you what a dog feels like, but it tells you there is a coherent cluster of usage. AI can do the same with bird songs, whale clicks, or even the ultrasonic calls of bats. It can group vocalizations into families, find repeated motifs, link them to behavioral context from synchronized video. These calls tend to occur right before hunting. These calls cluster around mother-calf interactions. Little by little, we can build proto-lexicons, sound categories that correlate with aspects of the animal's world. But we have to be extremely careful here, because not all impressive animal communication is language, and not all learned associations are understanding. We need some distinctions. At the simplest level, there is conditioning. This is the classic Pavlov's dog scenario. A bell rings, food appears, the dog salivates. The animal learns to associate a particular signal with a particular outcome or reward. It doesn't need to think of the bell as a symbol representing food. The bell just becomes part of the predictive texture of its world. Conditioning is powerful. We humans are conditioned all the time. A notification sound on your phone can spike your dopamine before you even know who messaged you. But it's not what we usually mean by language. Above that, there is symbolic reference. Here, a sound or sign stands for an object or concept in a way that can be transferred across contexts. The word apple refers to that kind of fruit, whether it's on a tree, in a bowl, or drawn on paper. A symbol can be used in different situations, and you can point to the aboutness of the sign. And even above that, there is compositionality. This is where pieces combine into larger structures whose meaning depends on the parts and the way they're put together. Red ball is not just red plus ball. It's a ball that is red, and you can swap in blue ball or big red ball, and the meaning shifts in systematic ways. Human language is compositional. We build thoughts out of smaller units. When we talk about talking to animals, this is usually what we crave, not just conditioning, not just isolated symbols, but something that begins to look like compositional language. Now we need to introduce what I'll call the alien mind angle. Every species' nervous system is, in effect, an evolved reality model tuned to that species' niche. A bat's brain is a sonar computer, optimized to carve the world into echoes. A bee's brain is a tiny navigation and foraging engine that tracks flowers, sun position, and colony status. A cephalopod's nervous system is spread through its arms. It may not even represent its own body the way we do. Each species lives not just in a different environment, but in a different carved-up version of reality, a different ontology. Our job, if we want to talk to these minds, is to infer that ontology from the signals they send and the actions they take. We're not just decoding a code, we're reconstructing an entire way of seeing. So far, we've surveyed the known territory, structured signals, clever minds, and tools to map patterns. Now we're going to walk out to the edge, where our concept of language starts to fray. Consider Alex, the African gray parrot. Over 3 decades of work with animal psychologist Irene Pepperberg, Alex learned to label colors, shapes, materials, and quantities in English. Presented with a tray of objects, he could answer questions like, "How many green blocks?" with the correct number, or "What color bigger?" to pick out the attributes shared by the largest item. He could distinguish none and all. On some tests, his performance matched that of a young human child. If this were just rote training, you might expect brittle performance. Change the context slightly, and the trick breaks. But Alex showed flexibility. When confronted with a novel combination of properties, say, an object of a new color, he sometimes spontaneously coined new phrases or generalized known concepts. When he got bored, he'd say things like, "I'm gonna go away now," and then fly off. It felt, unnervingly, like a personality speaking through that beak. Border collies offer another window. Some individuals, like the famous dog chaser, have been trained to recognize the names of hundreds, even over 1,000 objects. Say, "Fetch the blue ball," and the dog will pick out the blue ball among many toys, not just because blue ball was separately trained, but because it can combine blue and ball. In some experiments, dogs demonstrate what's called fast mapping, hearing a new word once in the presence of an unfamiliar object, and later using that word to retrieve that object, much like a human toddler. Then there are dolphins and great apes using artificial symbol systems. Researchers have used underwater keyboards with pictograms for dolphins, or lexigram boards for bonobos, grids of abstract symbols that the animals can press or point at to request objects, activities, or social interactions. Over time, some individuals learn to use combinations of symbols in ways that look, at least superficially, like simple sentences. Play ball, tickle me, go out. On the surface, these look like success stories, non-human animals using symbols in flexible, context-appropriate ways, combining them and even asking questions. And they are successes, in the sense that they push the limits of what we thought was possible. But if we're doing an honest audit, we have to ask, how much of this is genuine language-like competence, and how much is extraordinarily sophisticated pattern memorization plus generous human interpretation? There's a long, cautionary history here. Early in the 20th century, a horse named Clever Hans impressed crowds by apparently solving arithmetic. Hans would tap his hoof to indicate the answer to math problems posed by his trainer. But when investigators controlled the conditions, they found that Hans wasn't calculating. He was reading tiny, unconscious cues in the human's posture and facial expression and stopping when the human subtly relaxed. The mind was clever, but it wasn't doing what people thought. In animal communication studies, publication bias creeps in, spectacular results get attention, failed replications often vanish. If you spend years training one exceptional parrot or one dolphin, and you carefully select the most impressive interactions, you can easily overestimate what's typical. And humans are storytellers. We are very good at reading meaning into ambiguous behavior, because that's how we survive socially among other humans. So when we watch a parrot say, "Wanna go back," and then step off a perch, is that an English sentence expressing desire? Or is it a learned vocal routine that reliably causes a particular outcome, maintained by reinforcement? And is that distinction even as sharp as we'd like to believe? There's another deeper problem. Our metrics of success are human-centric. We ask, can the animal learn human words? Can it use our symbols, our grammar? We rarely ask the mirror question, how well can we learn theirs? This is where frontier AI projects become interesting. Instead of forcing animals into our language, we can try to meet them in their own signal space. Researchers are using self-supervised learning, algorithms that find structure in data without human labels, on massive archives of whale songs, bird calls, bat echolocation pulses, and more. The AI builds a kind of map, where each distinct call is a point in a high-dimensional landscape. Calls used in similar contexts form clusters, sequences form trajectories. If you've heard of large language models, systems that predict the next word in a sentence based on mountains of text, you've already encountered this idea. Those models represent words and phrases as vectors in a huge abstract space where king is near queen, and doctor is near nurse, because of the way they're used. Now imagine building such a space not for English, but for sperm whale clicks. In that embedding space, we might find that certain click patterns cluster tightly around hunting events, others around social play, others around mother-calf interactions. Some sequences might show long-range structure, like grammar, where certain phrases appear only in specific positions. We could, in principle, discover an entire communication system without ever hearing it as sound, just by reading the statistical fingerprints. But here's the catch. A statistical map of signals is not the same as a map of meanings. We could, hypothetically, compress whale song into symbols, translate patterns into text, even generate novel whale-like calls that whales respond to, without having any idea what, if anything, those calls feel like from the inside. Let's run a thought experiment to stress test this. Imagine you are an alien AI in orbit around Earth. You have high-resolution sensors. You can record all human audio and video, but you are not allowed to directly touch the planet, talk to anyone, or read any of our written text in a way that instantly reveals meaning. You just have raw pixels and sound waves. What could you infer about human language? You might start by clustering sounds, identifying recurring patterns of phonemes, syllables, words. You'd notice that certain patterns co-occur with certain visual scenes, this pattern when people hand each other objects, that pattern when they point at the sky, another when they embrace. Over time, you'd build an embedding space for human utterances. You could probably reconstruct a lot. You might figure out that some words refer to physical objects, because they're consistently used while those objects are present. You might infer that other words encode actions, or social roles, or emotions, based on facial expressions and body language. If you're very patient and very clever, you might build a semantic map of Earth languages. But what would count as proof, from your perspective, that you truly understand us? Is it enough to predict the next word in a sentence with high accuracy? Is it enough to produce sentences that cause humans to laugh, cry, or cooperate? Or would you demand some deeper alignment, some way to verify that the concepts inside your silicon substrate match the concepts inside our brains? Now invert this. We are that alien AI, trying to decode whales, or crows, or octopuses, mostly from a distance. We can record, cluster, correlate. We can, in principle, build models that predict what an animal will do next given its calls and context. But when do we say, yes, this is language-like. Yes, there is understanding here. This is where we smash into a paradox. To decide whether an animal understands our symbols, or whether we understand theirs, we must already have a definition of understanding. But that definition is what we're trying to refine through these very experiments. Are we testing animals, or are we actually stress testing our own concept of mind? One proposal, which I find compelling as a physicist, is to move away from language-specific notions and towards something more general, mutual information between internal models. Let's unpack that slowly. An internal model is the brain's private simulation of the world, its expectations about what tends to happen, how causes lead to effects, where food or danger or mates are likely to be. Your internal model includes the layout of your home, the personalities of your friends, the meaning of your favorite song. A crow's internal model includes the locations of food caches, the reliability of different humans, the structure of territory and threat. Mutual information, in the Shannon sense, measures how much knowing the state of one system reduces your uncertainty about another. If two systems have high mutual information, changes in one tell you a lot about changes in the other. It's like two synchronized dancers. Knowing where one foot is tells you something about where the other will be. Now imagine that conversation is not about trading noises, but about aligning internal models. When you and I talk, ideally, we're adjusting our private simulations in compatible ways. After our conversation, your model of, say, black holes is a bit closer to mine, and mine has been nudged by your questions. So perhaps we could define a conversation, in the broadest sense, as a process where two systems exchange signals in such a way that their internal models of some shared world region become more mutually predictive. Not just, I made a sound you twitched, but, we both refine how we carve up reality because of the exchange. In that framing, the question, can we talk to animals? Becomes, can we and an animal co-construct a patch of reality where our internal models overlap and become mutually informative? If a dolphin and a human can coordinate a new behavior neither could do alone, guided by a learned symbol system, that might qualify. If an octopus can use a visual symbol to tell you which object it wants to manipulate, and you both can then predict each other's next actions better than before, maybe that is a fragment of conversation. But here we hit another limit. What if the other mind doesn't carve the world into pieces that map onto our concepts at all? Ask yourself, what is a noun for an octopus? Human language is very object-centric. We like things and agents and clear boundaries. But an octopus's lived reality is one of flows, textures, affordances, what can be grasped, squeezed into, tasted with the skin. Its arms explore in parallel. Each arm has local processing. It may not have discrete categories like rock, crab, shelter, in the way we do, but something more fluid, more relational. So when we sit there with a tablet showing icons of fish, shell, toy, are we asking it to slice its world the way we slice ours, and then judging its intelligence by how well it complies? We want language-like structure. But animals may use entirely different representational schemes, like melodies of context, or spatial trajectories, or multimodal color motion patterns that don't map neatly onto our words. Our reality model is being stress-tested here. We might have to accept that there are minds whose thoughts cannot, even in principle, be translated into human sentences without losing their essence, just as you cannot perfectly translate a symphony into a paragraph. Let's zoom out. When we try to talk to animals, what are we really doing? We are, in a quiet, clumsy way, running an experiment on the nature of minds in the universe. Are minds convergent? Do they, when exposed to the same physical world, tend to discover the same structure, the same basic concepts? Or are minds radically plural, carving the same underlying reality into wildly different ontologies that only partially overlap? Consider three rough scenarios for our attempts at cross-species conversation. First, strong success. Imagine that over the next century, we achieve rich, two-way communication with multiple species, dolphins, whales, corvids, maybe even some cephalopods. We don't just teach them to use human words, we also learn their native signals. We develop shared symbol systems where we can talk about objects, actions, even abstract concepts like later or fair or remember. We begin to negotiate, to share stories, to transmit culture across species boundaries. If that happens, it suggests that meaning is, at least partly, an objective structure woven into the fabric of the physical world. Different brains, shaped by different evolutionary paths, can nonetheless lock onto the same patterns. Predator, offspring, tool, territory, pain, maybe even self. Minds, in this picture, are like different instruments discovering the same underlying score. Second, partial success. We manage narrow, context-bound communication. We can coordinate hunts with dolphins, urge whales to avoid ship lanes, negotiate limited trade with companion animals. Bring, stay, help, safe. We can share some signals about the here and now, but when we try to push into open-ended abstraction, talking about hypothetical futures, or shared myths, the link snaps. Our models overlap in small islands, but most of each mind's world remains private, incommensurable. This outcome suggests that meaning is somewhat shared, somewhat local. There are attractors, shared pressures like finding food, avoiding pain, caring for young, that carve out overlapping concepts. But beyond that, each species inhabits a reality partly its own. We can build bridges, but only across certain rivers. Third, deep failure. Despite our best efforts, and the full power of AI, we find that animal communication systems remain highly constrained. We can decode signals for danger, mate, food, stay away, but there is no evidence of generalizable, compositional structure. We never find anything like, if X then Y, or tell so-and-so that, outside tightly bound contexts. It's all exquisitely tuned to immediate survival and social coordination, but doesn't seem to support open-ended thought. In that world, human-like language might be a rare evolutionary accident, not a default. Meaning, in the rich semantic sense we cherish, might be a narrow ridge in the space of possible minds. Other animals feel, perceive, remember, but they do not manipulate abstract symbols the way we do. Each of these scenarios has profound implications, far beyond ecology. Think about AI. If we cannot even agree on whether a parrot understands the words it uses, how confident can we be that we'll recognize understanding in a large language model? We already see systems that produce fluent text, answer questions, even display what looks like empathy, without any clear consensus on whether there is anything like a unified internal model, or whether they're just mirroring back patterns from data. Our struggle with animal minds is a dress rehearsal for our struggle with artificial ones. How will we test whether an AI shares enough of our reality model to be considered a conversational partner rather than a sophisticated mirror? Will we look for compositional language? For theory of mind? For mutual predictive power in shared tasks? These are the same questions we're asking about dolphins and crows. And what about extraterrestrials? If a signal arrived from a distant star, structured, repeating, clearly not noise, how would we know what, if anything, it means? If we haven't even fully decoded the whales who share our oceans, how well prepared are we to decode a mind that evolved under alien chemistry and astrophysics? There's also an ethical audit we cannot escape. If animal minds are alien but not inferior, if they are different ways of organizing experience rather than scaled-down versions of us, what does that do to our moral framework? For centuries, humans have drawn a line, language on one side, moral patienthood on the other. To speak, to argue, to sign contracts, these have been treated as gateways to full moral consideration. But what if there are beings who do not, and perhaps cannot, converse as we do, yet have rich internal models, long-term plans, relationships, grief? Elephants mourning their dead. Orcas carrying dead calves for days. Corvids performing what look like funerals. Talking to animals is not just a technical challenge, it is a responsibility. The more we learn about their cognition and communication, the harder it is to treat them as mere background scenery in our human drama. If we discover that a sperm whale clan has a culture spanning centuries, transmitted by matriarchs who remember migration routes and social histories, do we not owe them something like the respect we grant human cultures? And then there is us. Our species is loud. We flood the planet with noise, acoustic noise in the oceans, light pollution in the skies, data streams in the air. How does that affect the ongoing, fragile conversations among non-human minds? Shipping noise masks whale calls. Urban lights disorient migrating birds. Our presence jams the channels through which other species coordinate their lives. The way we listen, or fail to listen, to other minds on Earth is a rehearsal for how we will listen to any mind we encounter, biological or artificial or extraterrestrial. Auditing the science of talking to animals is ultimately about deciding what kind of conversationalist our species wants to be. And beneath all these layers, neural, behavioral, cultural, there is a sobering, beautiful possibility that meaning is not a substance trapped inside a skull, but a relational property of interacting systems. Not something we own, but something that exists in the space between us, in the pattern of our mutual influence. When you talk with a friend, or comfort a child, or train a dog, there is a dance of predictions and updates, your internal model adjusting to theirs to yours. Perhaps the self is not a sealed container of meaning, but a knot in a wider web, a semi-stable pattern of information exchange. If that's so, then the question, can we talk to animals? Broadens into something vaster. Where does the self end, and the larger web of minds begin? Let's bring our journey together. We started with a simple, human question. When I look into the eyes of another creature and feel that flicker of connection, is that real communication, or just projection? From there, we stripped communication down to its skeleton, signals that reduce uncertainty, Shannon information as the geometry of possibilities. We saw bees dancing vectors, whales singing dialects, birds with accents, monkeys naming predators, cephalopods painting with light. We walked through evidence of complex animal minds, theory of mind in corvids and apes, self-recognition in mirrors, navigational feats that stretch our intuition. We met AI tools that can cluster and decode animal signals at scales no human could manage and confronted the gap between statistical structure and lived meaning. We traced a ladder from conditioning, through symbolic reference, up toward compositionality, and realized how much our thirst for language-like behavior shapes what we see. We examined parrot vocabularies, canine concept learning, dolphin keyboards, and lexigram apes, and we turned a skeptical eye on ourselves, our history of clever Hans, our tendency to see what we want to see. We ran a thought experiment as an alien AI in orbit, trying to infer human language from raw observation, and inverted it to appreciate the difficulty of our attempts with animals. We confronted a paradox. To test understanding, we must define understanding, and our definitions are on trial. In search of a broader framework, we introduced the idea of conversation as mutual information between internal models, two systems updating compatible simulations of a shared world. In that framing, talking to animals becomes building islands of overlapping reality where we can make each other more predictable in meaningful ways. We acknowledge that some minds, like an octopus's, may carve the world so differently that our nouns and verbs simply don't fit. We followed that realization out to the cosmic scale, 3 possible futures, rich interspecies dialogue, partial bridges, or deep limits, and what each implies about the landscape of possible minds. We connected this to AI and extraterrestrial intelligence. Our struggle to recognize understanding in a parrot or a whale is inseparable from our struggle to recognize it in a neural network or a distant signal. And we face the ethical weight of this knowledge. If non-human minds are not lesser, just different, then our noise, our exploitation, our indifference become failures of listening. So what have we learned? That meaning is not a simple on-off switch. It is a spectrum of structure, prediction, and shared models. That conversation, broadly defined, might already be happening all around us, in alarm calls and dance patterns and color waves, whether we notice or not. That to talk to other minds on Earth is to ask, in a very physical way, what it means to understand anything at all. Now I want to leave you with a contemplative takeaway, a thought experiment you can carry into your own life. Tomorrow, or the next day, find a moment with a non-human being. It could be a pet, a crow on a fence, a spider on its web, even a tree if you're willing to stretch the metaphor. Stand or sit quietly. First, let your usual human narrative spin up. That dog is happy, that bird is curious, that spider is hunting. Notice how quickly your brain assigns interstates that mirror your own. Then, gently, set that narrative aside. Ask yourself, what is this being actually tracking in the world right now? What variables matter to it? For the crow, maybe elevation, line of sight, proximity to other crows, the memory of which humans have thrown food or stones. For the spider, the tension in particular strands of silk, the pattern of vibrations that mean fly versus dust. Try for a moment to imagine their internal model, not as a cartoon with human thoughts, but as a different slice of physics. Now, make a tiny bid for conversation. With the crow, maybe you place a piece of food and step back. With the dog, you establish a new signal and see if you can build a shared expectation around it. With the spider, perhaps all you can do is adjust your presence, move slowly, reduce the noise in its web. Notice whether, in that small interaction, your internal model of their world shifts even a bit, and whether, in their behavior, you sense the faintest echo of a shift in how they predict you. That, in miniature, is the experiment we're running as a civilization. Can we, by paying careful, structured attention, expand the overlap between our model of the world and the models held by the brains around us? Not just animal brains, but human ones different from our own, and soon enough, artificial networks whose thoughts are alien even though we built them. Because in the end, this is not just about science, it's about how we choose to inhabit a world full of other perceiving centers. Do we treat them as background, as tools, as puzzles, or as partners in a shared, messy, beautiful reality-building project? And that brings us to the next great question, the one I want to leave hanging as we close. If meaning is something that can exist between any two physical systems that exchange information, if understanding is a pattern of alignment in the dance of internal models, then what happens to our cherished idea of the isolated self? Where do you end, and where does the wider web of minds begin? If your memories are shaped by conversations with others, if your identity is partly encoded in how you predict and are predicted by the people and animals around you, then the boundary of you becomes porous, dynamic. In a universe where time, space, and even matter can be sliced differently by different minds, how stable is the story you tell about who you are? And if time itself, as physics increasingly suggests, may be more of a constructed ordering than a fundamental flow, if past and future are, in some deep sense, patterns in a static block of space-time, then we have to ask, if time is an illusion, what does that say about the memories we hold most dear, the conversations that shaped us, the moments of connection with other minds that feel like the very core of being alive? That's where we're heading next on the Science Audit. For now, listen closely, with curiosity and humility. The planet is already speaking, in sonar and birdsong, in color and dance. The mystery is whether we're ready to answer.